What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and the Moon Knight trailer comes out today at the time that we're recording this video. And one of the big questions a lot of people have is, who is Ethan Hawke going to be playing in the Moon Knight show? Now, the most obvious answer here would be that he's playing like Khonshu. When Mark Spector is brought before the statue of Khonshu after basically being left for dead by Raoul Bushman and those guys, they're like, Khonshu appears before him, makes a bargain, that kind of a thing. And that's the line where Ethan Hawke is saying like, I sense so much chaos in you, or something along those lines. Then that's basically what he's saying, right? That he's essentially Khonshu, and he's like, I can give your life order and meaning, right? I can cleanse the chaos and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Now, that's the most obvious thing. The big thing that I'm kind of going with is that, well, if I had to choose one, I'd say probably Randall Spector, but I'd say he's probably going to be a combination of Randall Spector and Badir. Now, who are these guys? So over on Comics Explained today, we're releasing a video, if it's not out already, that's literally called Moon Knight, Randall Spector / Shadow Knight Explained. The character of Randall had been around for a little while, but he's basically the brother of Mark Spector. The idea behind this is that the two of them were basically mercenaries together at one point in time, but Randall had basically betrayed Mark Spector for more money and then left him and his crew essentially for dead. Now, along the line, there was a point where Mark Spector basically fought a guy by the name of Hatchet Man. The reality of this is that it's not actually Randall. Instead, what you end up learning is that in his journeys, Randall, along with his love interest, had basically come across this kind of prophecy of sorts that basically meant that if they fulfilled these particular actions, they could get the power of Moon Knight and replace him. This was a driving force for Randall because Randall had secretly witnessed Mark receiving the power of Khonshu when Mark was left for dead by Raoul Bushman. And so because of that, Randall was always trying to achieve the same level of power that Mark had. Now, all that came to a head, and ultimately the ceremony was actually completed. That using their lunar energies combined with like magic and so on and so forth, that basically Randall ended up getting like indestructible skin and super strength. He was basically a clone of Luke Cage by all standards of measurement, outside of how he operated. Now, eventually Mark Spector and actually the Punisher worked together to basically defeat him, and then eventually Mark Spector actually killed him, and he's basically been dead ever since. But in more recent years in Marvel Comics, specifically during the current run of Moon Knight, which is still ongoing, while there is the main villain of Zodiac, who's recently kind of come out of the shadows to reveal that like he's the one pulling the strings in secret, that what you had was a guy by the name of Badir, also known as Hunter's Moon. That what had happened here is that when Mark Spector had basically met with Khonshu and become Khonshu's avatar on Earth, he was considered one of his fists, but everybody has two fists. And so the other part of this was Badir, known as Hunter's Moon, but they never met before, and it's because they never really had a reason to meet before. That by and large, throughout pretty much his entire publication history of Marvel Comics, that Moon Knight always kind of fell in line with like the mission of Khonshu, of like what he was assigned to do on Earth. It wasn't until more recently in the Avengers run by a guy named Jason Aaron that he had actually defeated Khonshu and basically defected away from what his traditional mission was supposed to be and operated as an avatar, basically using the power of Khonshu, but not following the mission of Khonshu. This invoked Hunter's Moon, who basically believed that Mark Spector was like wrong, or he was screwed up and had to be corrected, right? Brought back to the proper path. The two of them had a really cool fight, and for the most part, he'll probably just end up lingering around for a little while. But the reason why I mention all this is because if I had to look at Ethan Hawke, I would say he's probably a combination of the two. I mean, there was a point in the comics when Randall Spector had actually approached the statue of Khonshu and tried to gain his powers, and it simply just didn't work. And so take those two elements and basically combine them. Essentially say that what had happened is that after Mark Spector had been injured, or whatever the case is, by whatever manner and whatever means, that Randall had actually attained the power of Khonshu as kind of an antithesis to Mark Spector. The big difference between the two, and the line when he says like, I sense a lot of chaos in you, is that there's Mark Spector as he exists, and then there's Mark Spector the way he was supposed to exist. So the big difference between Hunter's Moon and Moon Knight is that Mark Spector just has powers, and like he just fights people, and that's basically it. With Hunter's Moon, when he officially became a fist, he was basically given what was called the gift of course, basically meaning he has knowledge of all the Moon Knights or all the fists of Khonshu that came before him. In the same way that like T'Challa the Black Panther becomes a Black Panther and then gains like the ability to access all the Black Panthers before him, that's what was supposed to happen with Mark Spector. For whatever reason, it didn't. And it's largely attributed to like the multiple personalities that he has and like how chaotic his mind is and all that kind of stuff. And like, that's basically it. But imagine like that was actually Randall. That Randall is basically what Mark Spector was supposed to be. But Randall is a lot more violent. He's a lot more extreme. He fits into the archetype of himself as he's been depicted in comics over the years, which is basically chaotic. Now, another option here, and I don't really know whether or not this would really be the case, would actually be be Zodiac, right? Zodiac is the antithesis of Moon Knight, right? I mean, Hunter's Moon is just kind of like the other part, right? Just like another aspect of the Moon Knight mythos, and like that's it. Zodiac is the total antithesis to Moon Knight, where Moon Knight serves the purpose of like protecting those who travel in the night, right? And making sure like no harm comes to them. He's got the midnight mission, so people can like come and ask for help if they need it, or whatever the case is. Zodiac inflicts chaos. Imagine if like Moon Knight's arch nemesis was like the Joker with Moon Knight powers, and that's basically Zodiac. He's a really cool character. He's only appeared in a couple issues, so we have no idea what direction this story is gonna go in, but he's amazing so far. It's entirely possible that could also be Ethan Hawke as well. The important thing here though is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe prides itself on simplicity, right? I mean, here on the channel anyway, it's one of the things that's kind of stung us more than a few times, where like we kind of get caught up in the idea of like the possibilities, and then we end up like all the way out in well, not really right field, all the way out in left field. And then it ends up being brought back where it's like, it was Agatha all along. And that's it, right? I know all you guys who believe that like Mephisto was the one pulling the strings in WandaVision, all you guys were basically just kind of like, no, not Agatha, Mephisto, you know, that kind of a thing. It's part of the fun of just like theorizing and just throwing things out there. But if we're being practical here, Randall's the most obvious choice. What direction they go with him, I have no earthly clue. Randall or Zodiac or something basic like that, where he's essentially street level. He's part and parcel, if not equal to Moon Knight, and like that's basically it. But I'm curious, right? I'm really curious to see where this goes. Again, he could very well just be Khonshu. So like you see Ethan Hawke when Mark Spector first gets his powers, you see him appear to Ethan Hawke a few times here and there, and like that's it, right? You only see him maybe like 3 or 4 times over the course of the show. I could certainly see how they would do a lot of billing for Ethan Hawke, right? He's one of the most celebrated actors in Hollywood. He's a big name. When people are like, Ethan Hawke's in the show, it's like, damn, this is gonna be great, right? I mean, it's that kind of a thing, right? The MCU is, whether you love it or hate it, moving in the direction of kind of building franchises based on big names as opposed to like the value of the franchise itself, right? Like, hence Eternals, Slorefest. I'm sorry for all you guys who love the Eternals. It was okay. It's a movie that exists, but by and large, you know, Ethan Hawke's gonna draw a lot of names. It's just one of those things where it could kind of go either way. Whatever role Ethan Hawke plays though, this is one of the big downsides to him playing Khonshu. You would probably see him not just in this season, but like in future seasons, which is gonna cost the MCU a lot of money. And for those of you guys who are following a lot of the news and stuff that's coming out there now, the MCU isn't doing these great big huge contracts like they did with Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. and guys like that, right? Those huge multi-year, multi-million-dollar contracts, those are basically done, right? Like you get a contract for a particular set of events or movies or shows or whatever, and then that's it. Whether or not we see them again depends on whether or not Marvel wants to bring them back, right? So the most likely scenario here is whatever role Ethan Hawke plays will likely just be for this season. And if that's the case, it's gotta be Randall, or it's gotta be like Badir, or a combination of both, or some variation of that, possibly even Raul Bushman, right? I mean, there's no indication he's playing that character. He seems to have a little more of an intimate involvement in the life of Mark Spector than just like a guy who betrayed him and left him for dead. Again, you know, it's just one of those things. It's just one of those interesting concepts. I mean, he could also just be like the archaeologist, right, you know, that Mark Spector was working with when he was basically ambushed by Raul Bushman and left for dead, so that's possible too. Now, the other reason why I also say Randall Spector here is because he has had a lot of involvement. I mean, being the brother of Mark Spector is no small thing, but in terms of him like striking against Mark Spector, he's killed Mark Spector's girlfriend before. He actually caused a miscarriage with Marlene, right, the not really wife of Mark Spector, but like Mark Spector's girl at the time. I mean, the guy's caused a lot of havoc in the life of Mark Spector. One of the big issues you have though when it comes to Randall is that Marvel hadn't really done a very good job of doing anything with him, right? He's just an old school character that appeared for a little while. Marvel brought him back in an effort to drum up interest. That interest was there. And then after he was seemingly defeated, he just disappeared for something like 16 years. And so it's one of those things where if he does have a significant role, if it really is Randall, Marvel will probably beef him up a little bit, right? Give him more of a personal involvement. Not only that, having someone that's that close to Mark Spector as the main villain, that's something that we haven't necessarily seen before in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've only gotten that close a couple times. The first one is Bucky Barnes in Captain America when Bucky was the Winter Soldier, and they were really, I guess, brothers insofar as their relationship as friends. And then like Tony Stark and Obadiah Stane. And Obadiah Stane was like a mentor slash father figure. But in terms of like a straight up biological brother, right? Like they share the same blood. I'm not sure that's something that we've actually seen in the MCU. So it's kind of charting some new territory. I think it'd be cool. Not the most significant thing there ever was, not by any standard of measure, right? I'm not saying it'd be the biggest deal ever, but it would really kind of anchor the characters or anchor those two guys together in a way that we haven't really seen happen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, I guess maybe you could talk about Loki like falling in love with himself, right? Like Sylvie. But in any event, I'm going with Randall, right? I'm going with Randall Spector. I could be 100% wrong, and I don't care if I am, but I am going with it being Randall Spector, right? I feel like that's the most logical choice. That's the person he's most likely going to be. He's gonna end up becoming Shadow Knight. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.